Hello, all you scaredy cats and kittens, and welcome to the Two Scaredy Cats Podcast, where we talk about all things paranormal. We're your hostess with the mostest. I'm Stacy.
I'm Kara.
So, Kara, have you been doing anything recently these past couple of days, weeks here?
It's only been like a few days, right? We just recorded last.
I know, but I'm just wondering if anything's happened since then.
No. Or I've been playing a horror game.
Oh, yeah? What's it called?
Amori, because Jake told me about it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And actually, it's funnily, one of the horror games I've been playing kind of ties into my subject today.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
The ghost hunting one.
Ooh, spooky.
A tease of what it could possibly be.
I have no idea, but I'm sure some of our listeners probably do.
I mean, I doubt it.
I'm not big onto horror.
Well, yeah.
Games. Have you heard at all about the... Well, you know the new Scream movie comes out. Is it this week or was it last week? It's this Friday.
I thought it came out.
Did it?
I thought it came out
no,
a while ago.
No, it has not. They've been promoting it really hard, but I think it comes out this Friday, or it came out last Friday. I think it's this Friday. Anyway, did you know that movie is actually based off a real, story, a real true, crime story, serial killer? Yeah, there was some dude in Gainesville that would go around killing college students. He would, hunt them. He'd, sit out in the woods and, hunt them and stuff. And he was basically pretty much, crazy. They think he was possessed by a demon or something. And that's why he did what he did. Or at least that's the story they're going with. Yeah, but it is creepy. And there's a really cool show about it on one of the paranormal stations. Maybe Travel Channel or the Discovery about the whole thing. It's pretty interesting.
Did you watch Euphoria?
Did I watch what?
Have you watched that? Euphoria? Everyone's talking about it.
No, what's that about?
It's on Netflix. It's like a teen drama.
I'll have to check that out.
About drugs or something.
Huh, no, I'm not.
It's a little wild. I watched the first episode and I was like, oh my god, this is kind of wild.
No, I don't think I've seen that. I might have, actually, you know what? I might have started watching that at one point and thought it was kind of...
Zendaya.
Yes, and I have watched it, the first couple of ones.
Yeah, she's the main character.
Yeah. She's kind of crazy with drugs. She's always out trying to get the next hit.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, I did see that. It's not too bad. I haven't watched all of it yet. I've only watched a little bit.
I don't know what I thought it was, but I thought it was not what it was. Because everyone was talking about it, so I thought it'd be some cool sci-fi thing. Because
usually when people are talking about it, it's sci-fi stuff. Right.
Yeah,
right,
it's some cool, crazy sci-fi show. And I watched it and I was like, what? Why is it's not really my
watching some girls spiral downward.
But I thought it was interesting. There's a lot of nudity. Is what I'll say.
Yeah, she was experimenting, I believe, a little bit too, wasn't she? Okay, we should get started. All right, so I guess I'm going first today since you went last time. So my topic today is about vampires. But not in the way you're thinking of vampires. So, almost everybody at some point in their life has been enamored with a vampire, from Dracula to Twilight. Especially Twilight. I know, when you were younger, that was the big vampire thing that everybody was into. You and your infatuation with the sparkly vampires. But anyway, most of us, though, know that vampires are just, fictional stories that are made up. But there have been some real-life vampires throughout times. From the origin stories of vampires in general, which would be, the real-life story of Vlad the Impaler, who most vampires are based off of, who was this warrior king who would go around and any of his enemies that he caught or captured, he would impale them on stakes outside of his castle to let people know, that you don't mess with him and his stuff. So it should not come to no surprise that there are some killers in recent history who believe that they were the real-life vampires. And one such story that I found is an American serial killer by the name of Richard Chase, who got the nickname of the Vampire of Sacramento. So we need to kind of go back into his early years to kind of understand how he came to be the monster that he did. When he was little, he had a very abusive father who did not get him help when he was showing signs of being a sociopath.
Whoa.
So by the age of 10, he was showing some of the signs that they have to base off whether or not, you might turn out not to be, very stable. The 3 signs that he was showing that are like the big telltale ones was he was wetting his bed a lot. He was starting fires for no reason around people and in dumpsters and garbage cans and stuff like that. And then the last one, he was basically killing small animals like cats, squirrels, any puppies, kittens, anything like that, bunny rabbits. So he had all these different kinds of mental conditions, but there was one in particular as he started to get older that he came to light, and that was that he was a hypochondriac, where he was obsessed with him having some kind of ailment going on in his life or some kind of sickness. And he believed that his heart would stop beating and that someone was stealing his arteries. Like, he seriously thought somebody was stealing his arteries out of his body and making his heart stop beating. So this would went on. His mom would take him to all these places, and they would all kind of tell her, well, this is kind of all in his head. He would also use cut oranges on his forehead, believing that they would help his brain absorb the vitamin C directly. So that
doesn't make any sense.
I know. I don't know how he put these things together, but he felt that by doing that, the vitamin C would help with his mental disorders that he had. So he was cutting up oranges and, putting them on his head, hoping to absorb the vitamin C directly through that way. But his oddest illusion of all was that the bones in his skull, he said, were moving around like puzzle pieces. And he would sit for hours in his room and just stare in a mirror and watch his forehead. So he claims, and the bones in it move around.
Why?
And reshape. I don't know, and reshape.
That's weird.
And he got so obsessed with it that he ended up shaving his head so he could have a better view of watching himself. Watching this happen.
Okay, that's...
Yes, he was not very normal. So in 1975, he was institutionalized after being diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. So what happened to get him this diagnosis? Well, basically, he was at home, and he was, still obsessing over this heart thing where he thought somebody was trying to steal the arteries out of his heart. And he decided that it would be an awesome idea if he goes and finds a bunny rabbit, kills it, drains the blood from it, and tries to inject it into his body. Well, yes, that's what he tried to do. So when he does this, he ends up getting a blood disease because, come on, the rabbits are not the healthiest, cleanest animals, and their blood is not human blood, so it didn't mix very well. And he got so sick from it that they decided to institutionalize him. So he was in and out of these institutions for several years, and it was really hard for them to keep him in there because I don't know why things weren't sticking, because he seemed like he was crazy. While he was in the hospital, he attempted to drink blood from birds after killing them. They walked into his room, and they found him with 2 dead birds on the windowsill, and he was drinking the blood out of them because he thought that the blood from them would help, because he thought his mom was poisoning him, and he thought by drinking the blood from the birds, it would help for him not to be poisoned anymore. I don't know. It was so weird. And he thought that the poison was turning his blood to powder, and the only way to keep his blood liquid was to drink the blood of others and by drinking these animals' blood. So even though he had all this going on, the hospital decided that, hey, he's all right, so let's send him home with your old mom, because mom signed him out, saying that, she would take responsibility from him. So she signs him out of the hospital and into the mother's care. And after his release, he decides that he thinks like I said, he's paranoid, and he thinks his mom is trying to kill him, so he moves out. And he moves in with some friends. Well, while he's living with his friends, he starts taking drugs again, which he'd been doing drugs earlier in his life, and they kind of think that has contributed to the paranoid schizophrenia that he has now, is from taking all these drugs for so long. He was on a lot of really heavy drugs. So anyway, he moves in with his new group of friends, and he's taking drugs all the time, and he starts running around their house naked, even when they have guests over and stuff, and he's just doing really odd, strange things. So they ask him to leave. Well, he won't leave the house, so they all end up taking all their stuff, even though they own the house, and left him there by himself. So he's like living alone on his own devices, okay? And he starts to get into his own head and starts to go, crazy. So after his friends leave, he starts to go around and he was collecting like small animals from the neighborhood, and people would see him take these small animals into his place, but they never saw the animals come back out. So he was taken in, like I said before, he was still doing with small things. So he was doing like, kittens, cats, puppies, squirrels, birds, all those kinds of things, rabbits. And he would eat them raw, and then he would use their organs to make a slurry with Coke that he would drink, because it would help his heart stop from shrinking, because remember, he's obsessed that his heart is shrinking in his body and it will no longer exist. So like I said, during this time, he fell deeper and deeper into his own delusions. So then we come to 1972, and he decides that it's time for him to like do a real kill. So he goes out and he kills his first victim in a drive-by shooting. And the whole reason behind this first killing, by the way, was because he was mad because his mom wouldn't let him come home for Christmas. So because she wouldn't let him come home for Christmas, he decided that he's going to go kill somebody. So he kills this guy outside of his house who was helping his wife bring in his groceries. Now that was on December 29th of 1972. And he enjoyed it so much, he said, the rush of killing somebody, that he wanted to try it again. So on January 23rd, 1978, which is like less than a month later, and you can start to see like he's, in a descent here, like, how that is, where they get so caught up in the thrill of the kill, they don't pay attention to what they're doing.
Yeah.
So he went into the home of a lady by the name of Teresa Whalen, and she was pregnant, and he let himself in. And his theory was that if people had their doors unlocked, that it was okay for him to go inside and kill them because they wanted him to kill them.
What?
Yeah, that was. That
doesn't make any sense. Like, what?
Yes, I know. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever that his whole theory is that because they left the door unlocked, it's okay for him to go in and kill him. He entered her house. Like I said, she was a pregnant lady. Kills her. The first thing he does is he shoots her 3 times. Then he stabs her with a knife. And then after that, he cuts off some of her body parts. I don't want to say what on here. And then the remainder of his organs he removed, and he ended up drinking her blood, and then anything that he couldn't swallow or get down, he smeared all over the wall. Ew. Yeah. And then after all this, he has sex with her corpse after she's dead. Ew. So yeah, he's pretty like gone off the deep end now.
Yeah, he's a little
wacky. A little wacko, yeah. So that was on January 23rd. So on January 27th, this is his most gruesome killing spree yet of all the ones that he did. And this was his last one. They ended up nailing him after this one because he left so much evidence behind. So on January 27th, he entered the home of a lady by the name of Evelyn Meredith. And with her was her 6-year-old son named Jason. She had her 22-month-old nephew David with her, and her friend named Dan Meredith. Now, Richard came in, and the first thing he did was he killed Dan and Jason immediately. So that would be the friend and her little 6-year-old son. They were immediately killed because he really didn't care about them. All he wanted was Evelyn. And when he was littler, I forgot to mention this, he was undergoing some psychological evaluations when he was like in the hospital that I was telling you about earlier. And they found out that one of the reasons why he was, I guess, diagnosed with some of his mental disorders was because he had a hard time getting it up for women when he would go to have sex. So that was kind of like part of this rage that he had toward, and why a lot of his people that he targeted were mostly women. Like the more brutal stuff was done to them. So anyway, so he kills, the friend and her 6-year-old son. So then he goes and he finds Evelyn. So she was basically sodomized, and he ate part of her. The little baby, the nephew named David, was missing, and they couldn't find him anywhere after this had happened. So there was like this search for the baby everywhere, the 22-month-old baby. They couldn't find him anywhere. But they ended up finding him because a neighbor had heard all the commotion that was going on when he was in there killing all these people, had heard screams and stuff, and she called the police, who came, and when they were there investigating the crime scene, they found his fingerprints and her blood because like he did in the one previously. He had drank some of her blood, and then he took his fingers and was like smearing it all over the wall. So they found his fingerprint in the blood. There was a chase for him. You know, they went around, they tried to find him. When they finally found him, they found human brains in his refrigerator, which they think are from the little boy, because as it turns out, after they found him, they did not find the little boy for several months after he had been arrested and was in jail. They found the little boy behind a church, and his head had been cut off. They couldn't find his head. But they found his brain matter in Richard's refrigerator. So after all that happens, and it's crazy, like the whole story about how they found him and all that. So when he went on the run, he stole the car of her friend, Dan, right? He stole Dan's car, drove it up the street, and stopped like maybe 600, 700 feet before his apartment that he was living in at the time, and left it there and abandoned it. And the police investigated it, but they never put two and two together that it was that close to his apartment until later on. So he could have been caught a lot sooner than what he was actually caught. After his trial and all that, he was going to be killed in the gas chamber and this was in 1979 when they gave him his sentence and told him, you know, how he was going to die. So his fellow inmates, where he was incarcerated in the jail that he was in, feared him. They did not like him at all because of all the stuff he had done to people, and, you know, they were worried if he ever got out, he might eat one of them or whatever. So they would sit in their jail cells and taunt him to kill himself. So apparently on the day before, or the day after Christmas in 1980, he was found, he ended up killing himself. He was found dead in his cell. So they never got to gas him. He just, you know, took care of himself after the...
Yes.
Yep, I guess.
He took control.
But yeah, so this, like I said, this went on for several months in Sacramento, California, and people were scared because of how intense and how quickly this happened. You know, started off slowly, he did the drive-by, and then from there, like a month later, you know, next thing you know, he's like brutally killing people and stuff. All because he thought he was a vampire and he felt that the blood would, you know, help his heart. Yeah.
What?
I know.
That is so weird.
People are strange. They really are. But anyway, that's the story of the Vampire of Sacramento. So, people, if we've learned anything from some of these stories, it's please lock your doors. Don't leave them. Even if you live in the country, lock your door, please. Yeah. Scary. All right, so what do you have for us today?
We're going to be talking about yokai.
All right, never heard of it.
It is... okay, you should have heard of this because you took Asian art history. They talk about this in Asian art history. Like... I'm literally going to be covering stuff I remember being taught.
Okay, well, go ahead. I kind of slept and missed most of
I know.
Asian art history.
Didn't you, fail that class or something?
Yeah, I think I did, honestly. But go ahead, what is it?
So, it is a type of supernatural being in Japanese folklore. It's basically kind of like a blanket term for supernatural creatures, beings. Yokai range from mischief to friendly to fortuitous and helpful. So they're kind of like a wide array of different kinds.
Okay, so they're kind of like the djinn that we covered.
Yes,
before,
it is it's kind of like the Japanese version of it in a sense. Obviously, it's
so
not
they
exact.
Can be helpful or they can be like mean and evil. Okay,
they can be mischievous. Yokai they often have animal features, but they are typically humanoids. Some resemble inanimate objects, which is kind of weird. The types of some of the stories are kind of wacky. Like, we're gonna get into it. It's really weird. And then some have no form at all. One thing most have in common is the ability to shapeshift. That's kind of like the overarching theme. Is they will like trick humans by shapeshifting. Mm-hmm. The farther back in time, the more yokai were reported for strange occurrences. Basically, anything weird happened, like, they would just blame yokai.
Oh, okay.
Over time, events that were once believed to be yokai became fewer and fewer. So, like, obviously nowadays, it's not as prevalent as in, like, back in the day. Yokai tales began being depicted in public entertainment during the Middle Ages in Japan. And during the Edo period, the yokai became more formalized. There was kind of like a strict kind of storytelling narrative being told about the stories.
Interesting.
So we're going to get into some of the types of yokai. Strap in because there's some really weird ones. So this one's called the obake. these are kind of like, there's a bunch of different types, but like we're just going to talk about a few of them that I thought were interesting. The Obake is any creature that can shapeshift into a human form. Shape-shifting abilities used to trick humans. It includes foxes, raccoon dogs, tanukis, badgers, and cats. Basically anything that can turn into a human and then back into an animal. They're tengu, which I think are really cool. They're the Japanese bird monsters that take on human forms. They typically have huge noses as humans, and they protect the sacred Japanese forests and mountains. This one's one of the weird ones. It's called the kappa. It's a river monster thought to.
Wait a minute, I think I've heard of a kappa.
You probably have.
Okay.
They're kind of like turtle-like creatures.
Yeah. Wait a minute. Doesn't Pokemon have a kappa in it?
There's one in Animal Crossing. One of the creatures is called a
somewhere.
kappa. I never made the connection until just now.
Okay, interesting. All right.
But yeah, like I said, it's like a lot of yokai heavily influences pop culture in Japanese today. Like a lot of anime touch these kind of topics and other sorts of materials. They're river monsters thought to be based on Japanese giant salamanders. That's kind of like where people think it came from, was because they have really big salamanders in Japan.
Really?
They are known to drown people, and they're just a general kind of nuisance to society. They can speak Japanese, and they also enjoy sumo wrestling.
Oh, that's funny. Oh my gosh. So I'm like picturing some like sea creature thing with a sumo wrestling suit on.
They kind of have a shell.
I can see that. Oh, okay.
It's kind of thought that the myth was there to prevent children from drowning in rivers, because like it would be like your parents would be like, don't go play by the river because the kappa will get you, kind of a thing.
Right, and that would make sense.
So throwing cucumbers into the water was thought to appease. It was thought to like appease the kappa.
Oh, kind of like the story about the Ogopogo, where the Native Americans would go and give them like food and stuff and scraps.
There are still rivers marked today with signs warning of kappas. Like there are literal signs that if you go to Japan today, you can see a sign that says "Stay out of the water."
Okay, that's it. We got to make a trip to Japan to take a picture of.
I would just want to go because they have a bunch of cool shrines and stuff to like deities.
Really? Yeah, we should go there.
Yeah, horror is a very big thing, and it influences a lot of Western media too. A lot of because you think of The Ring, that's pretty sure that's Japanese.
Yep, that's from that.
horror.
I think that region. Yes.
Anyways, another type. This one's really weird. Tsukomogami. It is an inanimate object who gains sentience on their 100th birthday, though any household object could have this happen if you had it for 100 years. So, like, any object
could become sentient
in your house become sentient if you've had it for 100 years.
Really?
Isn't that
That's
weird?
crazy.
And then they can shapeshift into a human.
That is weird.
Like, what?
What? Okay, that would be creepy. Nothing like having an old brain sitting around turning into
a fork or something.
Okay.
That's kind of weird.
Right. Okay, that is weird.
So we're gonna talk about the Yamauba. It's an old woman with a monstrous appearance who live deep in the mountains. They have hideous features, like a mouth on their head. They pretend to be kind old women to trick victims into terrible things. They're kind of like a ghost almost. It's not like a tangible creature. The Kintaro is a child of supernatural strength who is raised in the wilderness and can talk to animals. Another type is called a Rokurokubi. It's a normal human during the day, but at night their necks get extremely long, or their heads pop off and float around.
What? Wait a minute.
Yes!
Their heads pop off.
Isn't that
okay?
Weird?
That's
like I said,
strange.
there's a lot. These are weird.
These are weird.
So this is kind of like the scarier one. So, like, a lot of people are scared. You do not want to mess with these kind. So they're called the Yurei. It's actually a ghost type in Phasmophobia. That's how I remember seeing it. I was like, wait, that looks familiar. It is a spirits kept from a peaceful afterlife because of revenge, love, jealousy, hatred, or sorrow. Yurei are very dangerous, and it was believed that they could cause disasters, famine, and tragedy. there's lots of money that were put in to build temples and shrines just to appease the angry spirits. So this is where it gets kind of weird. So during the Edo period, yurei were included in the yokai entries. There's a lot of debate on if a yurei is considered a yokai because they are technically ghosts. And most yokai are like physical. They're kind of like monsters. They're kind of like more like a cryptid than like a spirit. But there are like entries that include yurei in actual Japanese like literature, so that's why I included it, just so in case someone's like, technically yurei are not yokai, but technically, at least from what I read, just like telling you that that's a thing, because yokai seems like a catch-all kind of term, so it's everything supernatural, but just so we know that is a controversy on if a yurei is technically a yokai, like a type of yokai. But yeah, yurei are the scary ones, and there's a lot of scary stories about yurei. They're kind of like they're kind of like the other thing we were talking about, the jinn. They're kind of like the Japanese version of jinn. They're like kind of the mean ones, the scary ones you don't want to mess with. But yeah, that is what I researched about the yokai.
Cool.
Yeah.
Interesting. That it kind of sneaks into our culture a little bit too. You know what I mean? With people's obsession with like pop culture and that it kind of sneaks in a little bit. And it's kind of
like
funny
a lot of the artwork. Remember, like a lot of
these...
the Asian art history includes the stuff, because I remember having to, or specifically the yokai, like the weird creatures with like the human heads. You know, that was all the time, and especially during the Edo period, it's all in the art history.
I do remember the Edo period.
They had,
I know
like,
it was
really
a very strange, like, kind of time.
I just remember that.
Yeah, yes.
It's like the only time I paid attention in Asian art history. I thought that was the more interesting period of art. It kind of reminds me of like how like fairy circles are included in like, what did we say? Was it Renaissance or was it Victorian? I can't remember. It's one of those two. Okay, Victorian.
It's more like Victorian.
But yeah, I think it's interesting that a lot of the folklore is also depicted in the art for that time period.
That is interesting.
But yeah, that's what I have on yokai. There's there's a lot of anime that include it. Like Yokai Watch. It's literally called that.
Never
well, I googled when I was researching, it kept popping up, and I was like, "This is not what I'm looking for." But yeah. Anyways, if you enjoyed our podcast today, follow us on Instagram at Two Scaredy Cats Podcast, and please be sure to leave a review on Applepodcasts and Spotify. It really helps the show get discovered. And tune in 2 weeks for a new episode. And to all our scaredy cats and kittens out there, remember, curiosity didn't kill these two scaredy cats.